Basically identify the patterns and behaviors that are sabotaging their relationships and sex life. And so I help them identify those patterns. And as I like to say, I like to help people have the relationship of their dreams and the best sex of their lives. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, then go check out my work. The best place, of course, is my website at kevinanthonycoaching.com. From there, you can find my coaching programs, my YouTube channel, my podcast, all the other things that I'm doing in my world are all right there.
Thank you. So I guess my first question is probably the billion-dollar question that a lot of men would want to know is, Kevin, how can I make my sex life better?
Ooh, such a big question. Oh, where do we even start with that one? Okay. If I had to start, somebody asked me that, questions like, how do I make my sex life better from a man's perspective? The first thing I would start with is you have to learn how to master your own body. And by that, most men uh, do not have good control over their own ejaculation. They don't necessarily know what works best for them in the bedroom. Uh, if they're in older age groups, they may also be struggling with erectile dysfunction. And so, if you really want to make your sex life better, step one is focus on yourself, right? So, figure out, how do I get sort of my own house in order, right? How can I show up to any sexual connection that I'm having as the best version of myself? So, there's the physical part of that, right? I want to make sure that I'm staying healthy. I want to make sure that my sexual reproductive system is healthy, right? So I can obtain an erection when I want to. I can maintain it throughout the course. I can control my ejaculation so that I last long enough to be able to please her and also experience more pleasure for myself. Right. So we want to make sure that we have all of those things. Not to mention skills, right? You want to make sure that you have some decent skills in the bedroom so that you know what you're doing. And then, of course, there's also all the soft skills that you would want to work on too, like, how do I connect with my partner? How do I make her feel safe in the experience? Right? How do I help her to open up and just really let go and, trust me and take me in and all of that. So, there's so many different things that one could and should work on in order to improve their sex life. But I always say it starts with you. Right. So sometimes people will come to me and they're like, well, the sex isn't really that great. My partner this and my partner that and my partner. And I'm like, okay, slow down. There probably are some things that your partner's doing wrong and that they could do better also. But let's start with you first. Let's get you up to speed and make sure you're the best version of yourself that you can be. Once we've got that out of the way, then we can look at the dynamic between you and your partner.
Why do you think some men ignore focusing on themselves when it comes to their performance in the bedroom?
There's a couple reasons for that. One reason is there's this weird thing that I've noticed over the years that I've done this work where, and I use a couple of analogies to help illustrate this. So one analogy is walking, right? So everybody goes, oh, I know how to walk. I learned how to walk when I was, whatever, 1 years old, 1.5 years old, whatever it is, and I've been doing it my whole life. Of course I know how to walk. But if you go to a public place and you just sit there on a bench and you just watch people walk by, you can see, oh, the gait in this one is going to cause back problems. And this one's limping over here is going to end up with a knee problem. Like, you can see that not everybody is necessarily walking in a way that's beneficial to their body, but they take it for granted because it's just something. Breathing is another one, another example that I often use. Everybody's, oh, of course I know how to breathe. I've been doing it since I popped out of the womb, right? But if they were go to a breathwork class or practitioner, they'd probably find, well, they're not belly breathing like they're supposed to. They breathe too shallow, too fast, things like that. And so sex is kind of the same thing. In other words, it's something that we all think we know how to do. And it's something that many of us have been doing for a long time. But if we've never really actually taken the time to pause for a moment and go, okay, maybe there's more that I could know. Maybe there's more that I could learn. maybe I'm just doing it this way because that's the way I've always done it, but there's other ways of doing it. And I think one of the reasons is men just take it for granted. Like they just don't really think about the fact that this is a skill. And like any skill, it's something that you need to learn. And most of us did not grow up in an environment where we were taught any of these things. We kind of figured it out, we bumbled and stumbled and fumbled, and we figured it out eventually, and we made a bunch of mistakes along the way, and we go, okay, now we know. Well, okay, yeah, you probably do know some things, but how much more could you know, and how much better could you be at it if you took the time to really focus on?
I will agree with that. I think I spent a lot of times bumbling, fumbling, and stumbling myself. Thank God there wasn't any repercussions, but I remember men my age, and I'm going back to, let's say, like the late 80s, early 90s. The majority of our sexual education was either from school, like the technical, don't get her pregnant, right? Like things like that. But when it came to the performance, it was porn. It
Yep.
was the movies, because we couldn't go to our mothers or our fathers because they would probably want us to go to church and sprinkle us with holy water. We're just full of sins. Um, do you see that connection as well, where some people, their education or their self-taught isn't the healthiest because it's coming from somewhere else that maybe isn't 100 based in reality, such as, let's say, porn, for example, or other things like that?
Yeah, I would say it's not just some people. I would say that's the overwhelming majority of people because we didn't get that proper sex education when we were younger. And because we did bumble, stumble, and fumble, and because we tried to learn things from sources that were inadequate, like porn. And so most people have an unrealistic expectation of what sex should be or could be, and how to do it. And you bring up the example of porn, which is really a great one because I had on my show years ago, I had one of the top all-time male porn stars on my show. And one of the things that we talked about was how basically everything in porn is fake, right? Right down to, so if you think you're going to learn skills from watching porn, the conversation we had, he was like, I'll give you an example. He's like, because he used to direct porn even after he was a porn star. And he said, if I'm going to shoot a scene where a guy is giving oral sex to a woman, he's like, if he was really going to give her good oral sex, his face would be buried in there. You wouldn't see a single thing on camera. He's like, nobody wants to look at that. So he said, what we do is, we make sure that his head's in a certain way and he's a certain distance and he's stretching it so that it looks good on camera. And that's the thing. When we go to sources like porn to learn, we're not necessarily learning reality. The men are all jacked with huge muscles and the biggest penises you've ever seen. The women got filler in their lips and boob jobs, and the second he touches her, she blasts off into an orgasm. Like, that's not realistic. None of that is real. The positions they're in, the way they're reacting to the things, the way they're doing things. And so if that's our main source of learning, we're not learning what it means to have real sex with real humans in a way that actually works for people.
So no somersaults and backflips.
Probably not. Yeah. Rare cases.
I was friends with someone that he was really big into it, and he used to actually watch the interviews of porn stars. So not only did he watch their work, he'd watch their interviews and get to know them, I guess, on a right another level than just a consumer. So he was so into it that I remember that he would share that anytime he had a disagreement, and I think he learned this from one of the interviews, he would use different sexual positions as punishment. So, for example, oh, I came home and the food wasn't good. Okay, anal sex. I'm like, but it's not, are you weaponizing it because you saw some maybe BDSM or something influence you? Because at that time, it was new to me to hear that, even though I was familiar enough with the different scenes. When you mentioned that it's an inadequate source of education, young men who are struggling with a loneliness epidemic, who many of them are virgins past their 20s or entering their 30s now with everything that's going on with the stats. Do you see some men falling into having a connection with what they're seeing on the screen and less of a connection with their partner because of it?
Yes, absolutely, and it seems to be getting worse every year that goes by. It's a big problem, and it causes a lot of problems in people's sex lives. So it's one thing to watch porn. Like, okay, if you watch porn here and there, right? No, generally no big deal. But if one, that's your main source of education around sex, and two, if you're using it a lot, several things happen. We already talked about the fact that you're not necessarily learning what good sex is. But the other thing that can happen is you become desensitized to actual reality. So, like I just mentioned, let's say you're a guy, you're watching porn all the time, you're getting sensitized to, women with abnormally large breasts and women who perform sexual acts in the bedroom that maybe the average woman doesn't perform. They're obviously, for the most part, all absolutely gorgeous, right? And now you shift to real life and your partner doesn't look like that. She doesn't have boobs like that. She's not 6 feet tall with, blonde hair down to her butt and, whatever the ideal, you know, female specimen that they put up there in porn all the time is. And then you look at real life and you're like, ah. So men can have trouble achieving erections as a result of that. Another thing that tends to happen is they tend to be less attracted to their partner because they've become attracted to this ideal that is in porn. And again, real life doesn't necessarily look like those porn movies, right? So now they have less attraction to their partner. They're having trouble achieving an erection. The other thing that porn tends to do is porn tends to train men to actually ejaculate faster. Why does it do that? Well, because here's how most men will use porn. They'll spend 10 or 15 minutes trying to find the clip that is the one that, they want to watch that day. Ooh, yeah, she looks good. Okay, great. They put it on, they start masturbating. In 5 minutes or less, they're done, they're out, they're off to the next thing. They got the game on, they're doing whatever. And because of that, it's literally training men's bodies to ejaculate faster. So now they're over here in real life again with their partner who doesn't quite look like the porn, who isn't willing to do all the things that the porn woman does. They're having trouble getting an erection. Then they get it. They finally do penetration. They're in and out in 5 minutes or less, which, by the way, the average length of time that a man lasts, according to multiple studies, is 5 to 7 minutes. And the average woman takes 20 to 30 minutes to achieve orgasm. And that's what the studies say. My experience as an educator and as a coach, it can even be longer than that, sometimes upwards of 45 of foreplay and penetration to get there. So he's trained himself to ejaculate really fast and he's done and out and she's not at all satisfied. And so now there's this big disconnection between the two of them. And when it's a young person and maybe they're dating, this could mean that maybe there aren't subsequent dates. Maybe that relationship doesn't stay together. If they've been together for a while, maybe they're in a committed relationship or they're married, then resentment starts happening, that will build over time and affect the relationship in other ways. So, there's a lot of negative things that can happen. And I try to be fair and I tell people, look, I'm not saying you should never watch porn ever in your life. I'm just saying that if you choose to use it, you have to use it responsibly. And if you notice that you're starting to have any sorts of negative effects from it, you got to stop.
From a woman's perspective, then, what kind of impact would that have on them if they have a partner that's engaged in that type of behavior?
Yeah. Women tend to they tend to feel a couple of different things as a result of that. One is they often tend to feel objectified because if you look at how the men treat women in porn a lot of the time, it's like grab her, flip her over, throw her here, do your thing, have your way with her kind of a thing. And then men want to go into their relationship and do the same thing. And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. I want you to connect with me. I want you to be present with me. I want you to take what I want into, consideration. I want you to ask me, like, I want you to be loving and kind in this process, right? So there's that. There's, of course, the fact that they often won't feel satisfied because he's trained himself to ejaculate so quickly. She's like, "What? That's it? Like, I'm barely even warmed up at this point," right? So then, she can get resentful as a result of that. Like, well, he's always, he always gets to have his orgasm and he feels satisfied by this, but I'm not. And what women will do in that case is a lot of times they'll just shut down and they'll stop wanting sex. 'Cause, why bother? It's not really doing anything for me, right?
When you share that men are 5 to 7 minutes and that women are 20 plus, a part of me wanted to chuckle because I'm thinking, oh my God, that is quite the disconnect. And is that including foreplay or is that strictly the intercourse part?
That's a good question. I don't recall off the top of my head if they included foreplay in that. Uh, I don't actually know the answer to that. But if I answered outside of the studies and answered it from my own personal, perspective, I would say that for men, it's generally 5 to 7 minutes of penetration. Uh, or it could be 5 to 7 minutes of oral sex as well. Like, basically, 5 to 7 minutes of stimulation for a man is generally how long they can handle it. So whether that's receiving oral sex or penetration, they're generally out in 5 to 7. For women, I would say that, yes, you could include foreplay in the 20 to 30 minutes. So then that's one of the strategies that I'll teach men. It's like, "Okay, look, while you're working on learning how to last longer, it doesn't mean that she has to be unsatisfied the whole time, because there are other things that you can do. If you take enough time to warm her up, if you do foreplay, if you use your hands, if you use your mouth, if you use toys, you can get her much closer to that orgasm. Maybe you spend 15 of those minutes just on that foreplay to get her really hot and ready to go. Then when you do penetrate her, she's much more likely to have an orgasm through penetration."
Sorry, man. I was trying to save you with the foreplay question and give you guys a little bit more time because I can see a lot of men then maybe thinking to themselves, like maybe as I was thinking, it's like, wow, maybe I'm actually performing that length of time because in our mind, and I'll get your input on this, a lot of men are just trying to get to that finish line as quickly as possible, right? Where from a woman's perspective, they want that build up, they want that foreplay. I remember someone who I was speaking to, a sex coach, and they shared to me like, Train, intimacy starts before you get into the bedroom. You want to build up to that. Do men think it's just a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and they don't have the build?
Well, the first thing I'll say is it's not just that women want it, they actually need it. It's a requirement for them. And I really want men to hear that because it's not optional for women. And if they're really honest, they'll tell you that. They'll tell you it's not optional for me to like slowly build up and really get my sexual energy moving. It's literally how their bodies work. So, and that's a big difference. And then they've done studies on this too. I don't remember the woman's name off the top of my head, but she was one of the sort of early pioneers in studying the differences in arousal between men and women. And so, one of the things that they identified in men is that we often have a desire, and then arousal happens, and then sex. But for women, it doesn't necessarily follow that pattern. So for women, what tends to happen is there is no desire at first, but through foreplay, we create arousal. And then when the arousal happens, the desire comes, right? And so men need to really understand that. And if they do, then they'll realize why that foreplay and that warm up is so important. Because for us, we're like, "Oh, yeah, man, I'm horny. I think I wanna have some sex. Come on, baby, let's go," you know? And women, most of the time, even if they say yes, they're not necessarily feeling the desire in that moment, but if they know themselves well enough, they realize that, "Okay, If I say yes to this and we get going, then I will get there. Then that desire will come up. Right. So there's a difference even in how we get aroused and where our desire actually initiates. And that's kind of important for men to understand. So it's totally mandatory for women that they have this period of like start slowly, build up, right? In the Taoist traditions, by the way, they will describe uh, women as the slow boil, right? So they don't go like as men, we get it. Like we can just get turned on and we can be 0 to 100, right? But for women, they gotta slowly, but the flame is on low and they just slowly boil. And eventually it comes to a rolling boil, but it takes time. And because men, we operate very differently, it's sometimes hard for us to understand. The second part of that is, and you said this correctly, unfortunately, a lot of men have ejaculation as their end destination and they are, speed racer off to the finish line as quickly as they can get. And that's a problem, especially for men that don't have good control over their ejaculation. And I tell men all the time, you need to reframe that. There is no destination in sex, right? So there's no goal, there's no destination. The experience of sex itself is what you're actually looking for. And that's the whole thing. That's the warm up, that's the foreplay, that's the penetration. The two of you are co creating a physically, emotionally, and mentally enjoyable experience together. And if, oh, by the way, towards the end of it, we have an orgasm slash ejaculation, great. But to focus on that as being the sort of end all be all, like, yes, we're going to have sex, can't wait to get to that ejaculation. What's going to happen is you're going to have very short sex. You might feel somewhat satisfied, but she's not going to be. And I would challenge men also, and I would say, if you do 5 to 7 minute sex and you have an ejaculation, that's going to feel good. The ejaculation will feel good. And you'll be like, wow, yeah, that was great. But what if you could make love for 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours and experience that pleasurable sensation for an extended period of time where your sexual energy keeps building and building and building? Then, when you do eventually have an ejaculation, how much more powerful is that going to feel for you? And that's a big reframe for men because a lot of times when you talk about this, they think about it from the point of view of, okay, great. Yeah, I should last longer because it's all about her. Well, it is about her, but it's also about you. Realize that by learning how to last longer and taking more time, you get to build more sexual energy and you get to experience more pleasure as well.
So all the men are signing up right now for that 30, 40, 60 minutes because the way you described it sounds absolutely amazing. How important is that for men to understand that what you're feeling within 5 to 7 minutes? What if you were to do 30, 40, 60 minutes and then have that at the end? How important is that for men, Kevin?
Well, I think if they want to have great sex, it's critically important. Like, because I don't think you're really ever going to get to those levels of, sexual ecstasy until you can do that. So, if your goal is, I want to make sex everything it can be, then you just have to understand that. And, I did a whole episode on my podcast a while back. I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. And it was titled something along the lines of, this is what sex could be. Are you missing out? And in that, I was describing this feeling of having made love for, an hour plus and having all these intense waves of sensation and pleasure. And then at the end, after, orgasming, being like euphoric almost, like dizzy to the point where you're like, well, I know I need to get up and pee, but I'm not sure I can walk across the room right now because that's, and you can achieve that. That is achievable. I've personally experienced it many, many times, and I know many other people who have too. But you will not get to that level until you can be able to go for that long because you've got to be able to build that sexual energy.
From the men, it seems pretty straightforward when it comes to maybe getting an orgasm. For women, from a man's perspective, it seems to take a little bit more effort, maybe a little bit more involvement. And you shared a lot of tips how helping men to understand that if you can not only help yourself, you're also helping her as well. From a woman's perspective now, what do you see are maybe some of the difficulties that they face when it comes to achieving an orgasm?
Ooh. There are a lot of things that can get in the way. One of the things that I've said for years is that, as men, we want to look at sex as a repeatable formula. If I do X, Y, Z, it's going to result in, whatever. I probably should use A, B, C. It's going to result in D, right? Like that's how we like to look at it. If I rub her here, if I lick her here, if I penetrate her here, she's going to have an orgasm and all is great. The problem is that's not how it works in the real world with women. And one of the things I say all the time is that, each session, each time that you come together in lovemaking, it's going to be different for her. And furthermore, moment to moment during the lovemaking is going to be different for her. In other words, what she wanted 5 minutes ago may not be what she wants, 5 minutes later. And that's something that is confusing and sometimes frustrating for men. I just had a woman on my podcast this week. The episode hasn't even been aired yet. And we talked about this. I didn't say anything about this. I was asking her something else. And she literally said exactly that. She goes, well, I mean, for us women, each time could be different. She goes, each moment could be different. Every minute could be different. Right. And that was coming straight from a woman herself. And that's the truth. And so even though we may want a repeatable formula to help her get there, it's not going to be like that because things get in the way. Well, what gets in the way? This is part of your question. What are some of the things that get in the way? Okay. One of the things that she really wants is to feel your masculine presence there, meaning you are focused totally on her. So if you're focusing too much on maybe thinking about your fantasies, if you're focused too much on the porn scene, that you saw earlier in the day, and that's what's really getting your turn on going, if you're focused too much on trying not to ejaculate, or if you're just distracted by work, whatever it is, you're not totally present with her. She feels it instantly. And, if she was going up, up, up towards orgasm, she realizes you're not connected with her. Boom, down, 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 further away from orgasm she goes. So that's one thing that can get in the way. Another thing that can get in the way is women have this amazing ability to focus their minds on a whole bunch of things at one time. We call it diffuse awareness. I think that comes from nature because women tend to be the caretakers of children. Maybe they got two or three kids. Like they got to see, they got eyes in the back of their head. You remember that when your mom, she's like, "I see you. I got eyes in the back of my head." You're like, "Oh no, mom saw me." How could she see you? She wasn't even looking at you, right? But she does in a way, right? So she has this ability to track all these different things that are happening. Whereas men, we tend to be much more focused with our attention. So if as long as we're not checking out due to, fantasy porn, whatever, like we're focused on what's happening. But for her, if she's thinking about work, if she's worried about the kids, maybe they got a bad report card or they got a cold or the laundry didn't get done, like all that stuff is running through her mind and absolutely distracting her from getting to her orgasm. So that's another thing that can get in the way. Here's another one. Men tend to actually put a lot of pressure on women to have an orgasm, right? The problem is the more pressure you put on her to have an orgasm, the less likely she is to have one. Because for her to really orgasm, she needs to relax, soften, and open. And the more pressure there is, the more she contracts and tightens, right? So you just got to take all the pressure off her, and you'll see it. I mean, of course you see it in porn, but you'll also see it too, like where the guy's like, come on, baby, I want you to come for me. I want you, come on. The more you do that, the further away from orgasming she's going to get. So those are just three examples. Remember, these are women. They are complex beings, and there could be a whole lot of other things, but those are some of the biggest ones that I see. She's distracted by things that are going on in her life, in her world. She doesn't feel connected to him because his presence isn't there. or he's pressuring her too much. Those are kind of the three big ones that get in the way and prevent women from really being able to access their orgasm.
Thank you for sharing that because I know sometimes, and I've been guilty of this in my past, where I will believe something to be true just because I want it to be true, right? Especially in the bedrooms, like, yes, I'm performing because she has to like this, but I'm not getting the feedback that she does like it. Because from my perspective, I've convinced myself that I'm God's gift to women. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how I do it, when I do it, where I do it. It's great because it feels good to me, so it must feel good to her. Um, is there a disconnect when it comes to communication in the bedroom between what I like, what I don't like, can we try this, and what's working?
Yeah. One big thing that I see often is that couples simply just don't communicate about these things and assumptions are made. So, just like you pointed out, an assumption will be made that because it feels good for me, it must feel good for her. And that's really absolutely not true. And that it's not true for lots of reasons. I mean, the most obvious is that we have completely different anatomy, right? So what feels good maybe on the head of our penis isn't necessarily doing much of anything for her, right? And we've all experienced this, right? Like we're in some position, we're like, oh man, that feels good. But on her end, she may be like, ooh, that kind of pokes or pinches or hurts, right? So a lot of times assumptions are made that, well, I know this worked on my previous girlfriend, or, I know I saw this in porn, so it must work or whatever. And that's an assumption that's made because they didn't actually voice it. And then that's the other thing too, is people just they don't talk enough about it. And I think truly great sex, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, it starts long before you get into the bedroom. And one of the things that you should be doing with your partner is talking about sex and asking, honest questions about what do you like? What works for you? Like, what would you like to do more of? Right? And really talk about those things. And unfortunately, there's just so much shame around sex and talking about it and admitting what it is that you like or you want that most people just don't talk about it. And then they're back to that bumbling, stumbling, and fumbling we talked about before. It's like, I don't know, she's not telling me. And so I'm just trying to figure it out.
It's like both people are going in there with blindfolds and they hope they connect.
Yeah, and honestly, most times that's exactly how it is. Two people go in with blindfolds and just hope somehow it magically all works out.
I hope it enters because whatever I'm inside now, it better be you, right? Like they just don't know where they're going. One of my friends, she shared that she experienced the shame that you mentioned and the guilt where she whenever she was intimate with her partner at the time, the lights would have to be off and he would have to enter second because she was having body issues and she wasn't comfortable with her body being seen in the light. So when they're about to be intimate, she would enter first, turn off the light, and then he would enter. And you shared something that when we talked about that, people just don't communicate. I've seen people that they think what their previous partner liked, their current partner is going to like. Do you see that happening as well?
Oh, sure. It's kind of a natural tendency for us as men. It's like we feel like we figured out the formula and we just want to repeat the formula. But as we mentioned earlier, you know, we talked about the idea that, for her, just one woman, she's different each time you come together and sometimes moment to moment. And of course, there's massive differences between one woman and the next. Some women absolutely love anal sex and they're like, this works for me. Other women are like, oh, absolutely not. They are 100% no to that, right? So every woman is different. And you can't make an assumption that what a previous partner liked, this one will like. And so, I have this uh, sort of little mini masterclass that I teach men, and it's called What She Needs to Have Great Sex. And one of the things on that is you have to have the ability to be able to be open and change course, right? So if you're like, no, this is the way I do it, I always do this, and then I do this, and I do it this way, you're not likely to be super successful unless your partner that happens to be her exact thing. but that's rarely ever the case. So you have to be willing to adjust, to be willing to change, to be willing to accommodate what works for her. And that's going to change from time to time. It's going to change from woman to woman. It's going to change from moment to moment. It's going to change as she gets older, as her body changes, as she goes through perimenopause and menopause. Those things are going to change what she likes and what she doesn't like, and what works for her and what doesn't work for her.
Kevin, when a couple or maybe even a single man or woman come to you and they're saying, Kevin, I just need assistance with my sex life because it's not where I want it to be. What are some of the first steps that you do to work with those types of people who are coming to you proactively in search for better results in the bedroom?
I mean, if they come to me and they say, my sex life isn't where I want it to be, and I want it to be somewhere, I go, okay, first of all, you got to tell me where your sex life is now. What is it like? You know, give me an average sex session. How does it go? What types of things do you do? And I'll ask questions like, how long do you last? And does she orgasm? And all that kind of stuff. I want to get a picture of where they're currently at. And then the next thing is, well, how would you like it to be? If you're coming to me and you're telling me it's not where you want it to be, what would your ideal look like? Right. And then from there, we got to fill in the gap, because there's going to be a gap there. If there wasn't a gap, you'd already be where you want to be. Right. So then we got to figure out, okay, so you're telling me that you would like her to orgasm every time, to give you oral sex more frequently, to, want to do different positions. But what's currently happening is you rarely ever get oral sex, and she's not willing to do any other positions. You're not even sure if she's orgasming, right? Okay. Now, how do we close that gap? And we look at the things that are in the way. So there might be some things that he's doing wrong that we can fix, but there also might be some things in the way for her. One of the things I'll often hear from women a lot is like, I don't mind giving oral sex, but like he never goes down on me. So, like I feel like there's an imbalance here. Like, I'm not saying it has to be 50-50, but sometimes women are not motivated to give oral very often when they feel like their partner never takes care of their needs, right? So we got to work and figure out like where is the disconnect there that is creating the fact that your sex life isn't where you want it to be.
And then from a woman's perspective, it would be that it seems like they would want to feel like there's a balance from their view. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, somewhat of a balance. I would describe it more from the point of view of she wants to feel like her needs are being considered and taken care of.
You got me thinking, Kevin. You got me thinking.
Yeah, because
Because then that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be 50-50. It's not like, you give me oral, I give you oral. But what she wants to know is that you're concerned with her pleasure. And if sometimes that means oral, or sometimes that means you use a vibrator with her, or whatever it is, she just wants to know that you're actually considering her side of it, and the fact that you're co-creating this together, and that it's not just all about you.
If toys are involved, then, because I like that you brought that up, how does that, or does it, if it doesn't, how does that or does it impact the male ego because something other than themselves is being introduced into the action?
Oh, it can definitely affect the male ego. Some men have a real problem with this because they think, well, I should be the only, thing that can give her orgasms. But I hate to break it to you, man, that's simply not true. It's not. And, I would look at it this way. If my sex life wasn't where I wanted it to be, and my partner was feeling like, hey, I think in order for me to feel satisfied in this sexual relationship, we're going to need to bring some toys in to get the job done. The first thing I would do is say, okay, right? Because I want you to be satisfied. You're my partner. I want you to be happy. I want you to feel sexually satisfied, because the more sexually satisfied you feel, the more you're going to want sex, right? If you're not really getting anything from it, you're not really going to want it. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is, how can I do better? What can I do? Is there something I'm doing that's not right, or is there something I'm not doing that I could be doing? And that's a large part of what led me into ever even getting into this work, was just my own personal desire to want to do better. Like, how can I be good at this? And I tell people all the time, it's like people think nothing of hiring a personal trainer or hiring a sports coach or hiring a business coach or whatever it is, because they're like, yeah, I understand. I don't know everything there is to know about marketing, right? Somebody's going to help me with that. But they don't necessarily think about that when it comes to the bedroom. Now, if you have a great sex life with your partner and you both feel fulfilled and satisfied, maybe you don't need to do that. But if you're coming to me like you posited earlier, like, hey, my sex life isn't really where I want it to be, then find somebody that can help you get it to where you want it to be. Somebody that can teach you the things that you don't know. And sometimes we don't even know what we don't know.
Yeah, I 100% will say that go to Kevin and improve your sex life, right? We all need guidance. And the thing, and you made an example when it comes to like a coach at, let's say, work or sports coach or otherwise, is that there's areas where we'll take the guidance. Work is a big one, right? You do 3 months of training, 6 weeks of training, 6 months of training. Hell, there's even 1 year of training for someone else's company. But how many people take training for their relationships, for their intimacy, things that impact the person that they're saying that they love, but they're not taking the same steps that they're taking at work? It seems to be it seems to be a simple answer. Yes, I should be doing it. Why do you think the answer is not so simple when it comes to putting in the work to make sure their household and their bedroom are healthy for both people involved?
I mean, one reason is I think that they already think they know it, right? And we kind of talked about that earlier. Uh, it's like, what do you mean? I already know how to do this, right? So that can get in the way. A little bit of ego, like, oh, I shouldn't need somebody to teach me how to pleasure my woman, right? Like that's an issue sometimes. And I would say women tend to have a bit more shame around sex, so sometimes that can prevent them. It's a little bit more of the shame aspect that can prevent them from reaching out. But when they get to that point where they're like, "This really isn't working for me," they tend to be a little bit more willing to say, "I need help." Whereas men, the ego kind of gets in the way a little bit more, and it's like, "I don't need help with that," right? So that's one. And the other is, I think that there is a disconnect between what they say is a priority in their life and what is actually a priority in their life. So, in a sense, most people, if you ask them if they're in a committed relationship, if you ask them if their relationship and their sex life was a priority, they'd say, of course they are, right? But then if you look at their actions, well, what are you actually doing? Do you work on nurturing your relationship every day? Right? Do you do those little things day in and day out? Do you bring your wife flowers? Do you have the conversations that need to be had? Do you work on improving your sex life? The answer to those questions usually is no. So I'm like, but if you're telling me it's a priority and it's important to you, then why aren't you making it a priority? You'll prioritize your golf game on the weekends. You'll prioritize watching the football game on Sunday. You'll go out of your way. You'll clear your schedule. You'll meet up with your bros. You'll have food. You'll have beer. Like you'll bring whatever they want to the party. But did you bring your wife some flowers in the last 6 months? Right. So I think a lot of times there's just a disconnect between what they say is a priority in their life and what is actually a priority.
I'm a man. I don't do flowers, right? I can like the ego talking. I can definitely see that because you're absolutely right. There was someone that shared where his fiance, sorry, wanted to try something differently in the bedroom. And he was telling me about it, Kevin. And I asked him more, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I was like, what else? And, without getting into too many details, because I don't want to visualize his fiance in that way, right? But I was like, tell me more. And then after he was telling me, he's like, Terrain, I think that's gay. I'm like, how is that? I'm like, how is that that? I was like, look at it like this, and Kevin, I'll get your input. I was like, take away what you may think it is because of some nonsense that you were taught maybe as a child or whatever, or maybe other friends. This person who you're looking to marry, do you love this person? He says, yes. So wouldn't an act of love be showing her in more than one way that you love her, such as the bedroom? He was like, It's like I didn't think about it that way. I was like, yeah, doesn't she show you how she loves you in different ways? And he says yes. And I explained to him, it's like sometimes as men, what we think is, to your point earlier, Kevin, is that I'm the best man for this woman right now because she's with me. No one has more money. No one is better looking. No one has a faster car. No one is better in the bedroom. Men need a wake up call and realize that you have to put in the effort every single day because, as you mentioned, she's different in every moment. So on Monday, that position that she really enjoyed, that was good for Monday. What are you going to bring on Tuesday and Wednesday? Is that, am I summarizing it accurately? Is that how some men will think about it and will look at it?
Yeah, I imagine that some men do look at it from that point of view of like, I'm the best thing that's ever happened to her. But there is a reality that we all, men and women, have to come to in this world. It doesn't matter how smart, how rich, how good looking, there's always somebody who's smarter than you, richer than you, and better looking than you. It's just a fact of life, right? There just always is, or somebody that has something that you don't have. So, the first part is don't think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like there is a possibility that she could meet somebody better than you. Now, if you're doing all the things that you should be doing in your relationship, it won't matter if she meets somebody better than you in all those areas because she will be so in love with you that she won't care and she won't even notice the other person. But as you accurately said, it is the little things that you do day in and day out. You've got to nurture the relationship. You've got to put in the work. That's what it really comes down to. And, you know, yes, sometimes you'll see a really beautiful woman with a like so-so looking guy, and the assumption always is, well, obviously he's wealthy or he's got a really big penis, right? Like that's what everybody thinks. But those things actually are not what's most important to most women. For most women, what's important is the connection that she has with her man. And so you will often see beautiful women with, guys like if you were ranking them 1 to 10, she's a 10 and maybe he's like a 6 or a 7. And you're like, what's going on there? Because he treats her nice, because he cares about her, because he does all those little things. And those are the things that are truly important to her.
Kevin, one final question before I let you go, my friend. In relationships, I want to ask you this question, but I want to give you three wishes when it comes to this question. What are three things you wish men knew about what it means to, sorry, about redefining what it means to be a man and a warrior in their relationships?
Ooh, three things that I wish men knew about what it means to be a man and a warrior in their relationship. Okay, the number one thing that I wish men knew is, and men used to know this, we've just forgotten it, is that it is perfectly okay. In fact, it is important to show up as what I call a healthy, integrated masculine man. So in today's society, there is a ton of pressure on men to not be masculine because masculinity is toxic and it's this and it's that. And I would challenge that. And I would say, no, healthy masculinity is not toxic. And what your woman is actually seeking desperately these days, because I hear it from women all the time, is a healthy masculine man. She wants him to be masculine, right? In those classically masculine ways. But a healthy masculine also does things like communicates well, is in touch with his feelings, doesn't suppress them, can communicate those feelings when necessary and appropriate, takes her thoughts and feelings into account, right? So that is the one thing. It's like, man, you need to show up as a strong, healthy, integrated masculine. The second wish is that I really wish men would understand that you can be both of those things at the same time. You can be a very masculine man, but you can also be caring and loving. And it doesn't make you gay if you share your feelings, right? Now, I'm not saying that you should go, curl up in your woman's lap in a ball and cry your eyes out and dump all your feelings on her, then that may not necessarily be the best thing for creating polarity in your relationship. But showing up and, if a little tear, comes out because you're sharing with her how much you love and appreciate her, that's not only okay, it's good. And she will look at that because, she wants a warrior, but she also wants a warrior with heart, right? And so that's that idea of bringing both of those things together. So I wish men would understand it's not one or the other. It's not I'm either hard ass warrior or softy, cry in my cereal every morning. Like you can integrate those two sides in a way that is very healthy. So that's the second thing. And the third thing that I really wish men would understand, and this is something we have been talking about so far in this podcast, is that it takes effort. There's no such thing as set it and forget it. And you see a lot of men do this. It's like they'll put effort in the beginning when they're dating. Oh, well, now we're exclusive or now we're married, and they just go on autopilot, right? It's like, okay, got the relationship thing locked down. Now I'm going to focus on work or